Yo, what is up, chat? Welcome to the stream. So today I thought I'd actually try looking at Fat Electrician. I want to do some more just chatting things. Um, so like still loading. So yeah, I wanted to get more into just chatting. So I thought we could start off with doing some kind of reaction as content. I don't know how good I'm going to be. I'm kind of just like going at it off the cuff kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, depending on how long this takes, might have time for like 30 minutes or so of Raft because we left off at a place where we didn't necessarily have to, and it's going to be pretty quick, roughly, so we could probably fit some Raft in there. But yeah, anyways, let me just actually give me 1 second, actually. Just want to check some things. Never mind. It's fine. Anyways, but yeah, Fat Electrician. I have seen him before. I do like history, so, and it seems to be about when Washington crossed the Delaware, I believe, and to catch some mercenaries off guard. I believe it was mercenaries, not actual British soldiers during the Revolutionary War, like Prussian mercenaries, which, I mean, basically Germany. But yeah, let's get into it.
Ah, yes, my favorite Christmas story.
Ah.
Today we're talking about George Washington crossing the Delaware. Yes, like the painting. We've all seen the painting. We've all seen the internet memes like America will cross a frozen river on Christmas.
Let's see. That's right. I will cross a frozen river in the middle of the night to kill you. Questions in your sleep on Christmas. Okay.
In your sleep, haha, that's funny. What's not funny
it
is
is
the fact that everybody knows the painting, but almost nobody knows the full story.
Okay. I have. What is that statue? Can that get me banned? That's better. Yeah, I have more context with painting. I think most people just think, oh yeah, Washington Cross, the Delaware got captured some British. They weren't British, but they were more or less unarmed. But they weren't British. I think that's one thing people get. They were British mercenaries, well, hired by the British, but they weren't British.
And the reason that's a tragedy is because while the painting is cool, the painting doesn't convey the message that Washington didn't just cross the Delaware River while it was frozen. He crossed it on 3 separate occasions, handed out 3 separate ass whoopings.
Okay, that is interesting. That is something I did not know. Let's see what he has to say about that.
American Revolution, and it is probably the 10 most important days in American history, and we're
gonna get all of it. Right. So like, did this all happen like just under 2 week? Oh, like just under a 2 week time span? Like he crossed the Delaware like 3 times over the course of about 2 weeks, kind of thing. I assume so, because I don't think it takes 10 days to cross the river and capture people.
Word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Supremacy World War III,
Should I watch this? I've heard people argue. I've heard some react to it just to let it play out, support the creator. I heard something about getting in trouble for doing that. But yeah, I could let it play out. I just heard some people have trouble with it. Could edit it out.
And go to war with all of the other states, which is usually what I like to do. I like to play
Iowa
because I'm from Iowa, and then I like to attack Minnesota for obvious reasons.
Banter. No, it's not banter. It's not banter, not now.
Obvious reasons.
My opening attack is obviously against the British because it's
right.
And nothing makes me want to watch the Grinch and cross a frozen river on Christmas to fight British people like the holiday season. But it gets even better because if you use my link down below, you're gonna automatically unlock a bunch of freebies, including a special weapon, the railgun. Which, I mean, let's face
railguns, which I believe are highly impractical in real life. The energy costs just aren't worth what you get out of them. So yeah,
Now we're just playing on easy mode. We already
that's why the US gave up on them. It's just like not really worth it. Like, you know, principle of diminishing returns and stuff.
beat the British with muskets and cannons, and now we've got rail guns. They don't stand a chance. If George Washington would have had one of these bad boys, they probably would have thought twice about putting a tax on tea. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, go check out Supremacy World War III. It's free to play. The link's down below. Let's get back to the video.
Hopefully I don't get in trouble for this. Despair.
Our story begins in December of
Let's see what we got here.
George Washington is currently leading the Continental Army, and things are not going well. They have suffered loss after...
True. American Revolution, because oversimplified, for example, touched on this. But yeah, America wasn't just like this dominant force throughout the war. America was struggling constantly, and some key victories were able to get to move the revolution along more, keep morale up enough, but it wasn't like this universal, like, you know, like victory, I guess. Like, it wasn't like the US was overwhelmingly outpacing the British. They were just being enough of a nuisance. And then when France gets involved, it's basically the finishing blow. As now, they don't want to deal with a nuisance as well as another powerful nation. That's a little too much.
Loss after loss at the hands of the British. They've lost New York, they've lost Long Island, they've lost Fort Washington, they've lost Fort Lee, and they are now being driven out of New Jersey. All that remains of the
Fort Washington
at this point is about 2,400 men. They are beat up, they are freezing, they are starving.
But here's another thing. I'm sure there are a lot of militias that are able to at least relieve the, you know, Continental Army itself.
And they've lost almost all of their supplies in their previous losses, and they are now being forced to retreat across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania to desperately try to stop the British from taking Philadelphia. And if that wasn't bad enough, the army is about to not exist, because on December 3rd...
Hold on. Is this semantics? Like, he crossed the Delaware 3 times? The first time to retreat, the second time to go and catch the mercenaries off guard, and then the third time to retreat again with the mercenaries in tow. Like, is that basically what it is, or they actually do 3 separate, like, crossings that were attacks, you know? So there's like, what, like 6, 7, whatever crossings in total, but 3 of them are actual, like, offensive crossings, and the other ones are just crossing back over after the attack.
Midnight, all of the enlistments for all of the men in the Continental Army expire, and most of them are probably going to go home because they're tired of getting their asses kicked.
Right.
Which means the American Revolution is going to dissolve, and it's game over. We remain British forever.
Well,
okay. That's terrible mainly for the elites like Washington, like Franklin, like all those guys, because those guys were the ones who are an active, like, actual active rebellion. So, like, there are ulterior motives that those elites have that aren't really present in the common officer, I guess, or enlisted men. Because, like, the enlisted men, they're just there because they're there to fight under Washington. Washington and Franklin and, you know, all these other Continentals, the Adams, they're actually there because they actually have, like, their heads on a piece of paper, on a bounty. Like, their heads are bountied by the king, where, like, the common soldier probably doesn't have that much of that concern. They could probably argue that they were just fighting under, you know, the leadership of the colony. It wasn't like, just like British officers, they're not, or British enlisted men really, aren't necessarily fighting for the crown itself. They're just fighting because they happen to be British subjects and they signed up under Britain, you know? So there's probably going to be a lot more leniency with like just the enlisted men, or at least there probably could be the argument for that. Whereas like Washington, John Hancock, all the guys who signed the Declaration and actually instigated the war actually are the ones with the bounties on their heads and would actually be how do I word it? Encouraged to keep up the fight regardless of the outcome, because they're obviously staring down the hangman's noose if the rebellion fails, which it doesn't, but if it did,
is terrible. And the British realize this, so they decide they're not going to attack Philadelphia. They decide it's the fourth quarter, they're up by 100 points, they're just going to take a knee, let the clock run out, and win the game. There's no reason for them to march south, have one last fight with Washington, and take Philadelphia, because the American Revolution is dying just fine on its own. So
right. That is actually a smart tactic. If you know the enemy is pitifully dissolving its morale, there's really no reason to waste time. I mean that's the logic. I think I had to take advantage of that. Like, hey, they're basically crumbling already. Let's just deliver a finishing blow to make sure they don't somehow find a way to rebound out of this. Which, that's the thing. Like, desperate men tend to find desperate or resort to desperate tactics, and there are times when tactics that sound ludicrous actually do end up working, depending on like your army's skill compared to the opposing armies, your understanding of the enemy, so on and so forth.
General Howe and General Cornwallis order their men to go into winter quarters. General Cornwallis makes plans to go back home to Britain to spend winter with his wife, and General Howe is going to...
Also, a cold winter would probably theorize, like, because you have to remember, this is the northern United States, like New England area around. So these winters are cold, and cold environments, at least at this time, even earlier, really, you're probably not going to ideally fight in the harshest of the weather, because, men have their limits. Like, nowadays, you have insulated gear and things like that to help you fight in cold weather conditions much better. But back then, I'm not sure how insulated those wool coats were for that kind of weather.
Go up to New England and spend winter with his mistress. Okay, the British obviously
okay.
In this story, but you got to give it to him.
Mistress. Huh. Is that implying that he's married? Or is this just like a down low relationship,
That's a brilliant plan, right? You get to go home, be warm, get a piece of ass, and still win. I'll make that deal.
That's a good deal. That is a good deal. I'd make that deal.
Plan did not account for was that a 6'2" giant.
Inglourious is an interesting movie. I like it.
By the name of George Washington was about to make the decision that he was going to be the main character of the American Revolution. He was about to have
Washington?
a moment where he decides nothing's over till it's over. But the clock is ticking. Right now it's about
right.
December 8th, and he's got till December 31st at midnight to figure out a way to get all of his men to not abandon their enlistments.
Oh yeah, because obviously this isn't weather related. Like, it's not like, oh, December 31st is when it's going to get the coldest and we can't do anything because will be too freezing. It's like, no, it's enlisted. Yeah, it's time.
Remain in the army, build an army over the course of the next winter, and then take the fight back to the British. And to make things 10 times worse, pretty much everybody has given up on him. Continental Congress is pissed off at his string of losses. All of the other...
Rightfully so. Or, well, I shouldn't say... Yeah, probably rightfully so, because keep in mind, there isn't this like undying patriotism towards the American way of life yet. There isn't an American way of life yet. This is the beginning of the country. You have to instill trust and loyalty in people who have already been trusting and loyal to another government. That's going to be very difficult. because people obviously are already loyal to the British Empire. So, and now you have to come in and say, but be loyal to us instead. And if you just keep getting these losses, that's not going to work because people want strong leaders. And if you can't prove to be a strong leader that gets things done, you aren't going to keep a loyal constituency, I guess, for very long because, like I said, like nowadays it's like, it's instilled into the American populace who are natives to the United States, born and raised in the United States of America. There is no, oh, I remember a time before the United States anymore. It's ingrained in every citizen of the country that they are Americans. So, and we're taught to be loyal Americans since childhood. So that's not really as much of a concern now. Like, the American military would probably still function regardless of trust and leadership.
Top generals in the Continental Army are secretly going behind his back, telling Congress that they should be his replacement, and they're talking about firing George Washington. They've basically already decided they're going to let the British...
It's crazy because George Washington has gone down in history as like the general in the United States, like just the general, like the general of all time. It's so like now that at one point it's like he's just a general who has to prove himself even after spending plenty of time in the British military as like a continental British officer. And then he comes in and be like, as a general of the revolution, being like, okay, now I have to like prove myself now. It's crazy. Like now it's like, oh yeah, he's the first president, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was always like that even during the revolution when he was probably still a pretty credible high-ranking officer to become general of the Continental Army.
Plan work. They're going to let the clock run out. They're going to let the American military dissolve. And then they're going to hope in the spring everybody will have forgotten that they've just had their ass beat for the last 6 months straight. And they'll be able to raise a new army, put somebody else in charge of it, and they're going to go fight the British. But George Washington knows the people aren't going to forget. This revolution is going to die right here, right now, if he can't do something about it. And this is the lowest point of George Washington's life. In his own writings, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, I want to quit. I wish I could quit, but I know if I quit, nobody else is going to take up my spot and do what needs to be done right here, right now. He knows that he is a dad. He is a father to a new nation, and quitting is a luxury that he doesn't have. So he gets to work and he comes up with a plan.
Again, quitting is a luxury probably most of these people have, but Washington doesn't have it specifically because now there's a bounty on his head. Like, if this was like, oh yeah, the king is obviously going to pardon us, blah, 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 he'd probably feel a lot more comfortable quitting, but yeah, when you got a gun pointed to your head, it's not going to be as easy to quit. Really isn't. So, again, he's probably operating off that kind of logic.
Decides that somehow, some way, before December 31st at midnight, he needs to get a win. He needs to get a win so he can capture enemy supplies, and more importantly, he can get his men and the revolution as a whole some morale. He needs to prove to himself, his men, and the whole world that the British military is not invincible and that they can be beat. And then maybe, just maybe, his men will re-enlist and he can keep the revolution alive. He can turn this from a fourth quarter...
Again, I think he'd need to have... So yeah, it's true that even a decent, all-right victory that gets something done can encourage some men to keep up the fight, but but that's not necessarily... Getting a minor victory will obviously keep some people enlisted, but a lot of men would probably want a very strong victory that they can feel confident in him to repeat, Like, it's like, okay, so, I got a minor victory for some minor hill. Woohoo. It's like, okay, so maybe a quarter of the men re-enlist and all that. But like to get them all to re-enlist, you probably need to take a whole city, like multiple times.
situation to a halftime situation, and he can come out of this winter with a bigger, better army that's ready to take the fight to the British. But in order to accomplish that, he's going to have to change everything. Up until this point in the war, George Washington has led a very conservative, defensive-minded war. He's going to have to flip that on its head.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can... That's the thing. When you fall into a conservative mindset when it comes to warfare, and you don't have the numbers to throw at that mindset, that's how you lose a war. Because you got to be able to adapt to the situation. If you can't do that, you're not going to win.
He is going to have to get aggressive and go out on the offense. He is no longer going to be the general sitting up on the hill overlooking the battlefield issuing orders. He is going to be on the front lines with his men, leading them in combat the entire time, because that's the...
It's actually interesting because I feel like throughout most of history, that's basically how it went. You like the kings of the medieval era, you know, were aiding in the charge themselves, even leading it, probably. So yeah, that's the thing. Like the leading officers just sitting back watching the battle from a distance. That's a very recent what's not advancement, I guess, of war. Like back 1,000 years ago, you know, you'd see the king himself fighting the war. You'd see that's like in the United States, the president himself going to, you know, Afghanistan, or, you know, like if Bush went to Afghanistan himself, grabbed a gun and shot at the Taliban himself, and that's what people, and that's just the history. And honestly, I'm not going to actually elaborate on that. But suffice it to say, I think we've possibly become a little more reckless because the leadership knows they could sit back and let other people do the fighting like that. Anyways.
Only way his men are going to follow him. With that in mind, he decides they are going to go to the nearest British outpost. They are going to launch an attack, and they are going to crush them there, steal all the supplies, and get this victory. But that's easier said than done, because the nearest British outpost is a town called Trenton in New Jersey. So they're going to have to recross the Delaware River when it's borderline frozen in winter, when the men are already freezing, starving, and beat up. So the journey alone is a humongous ask, and even if they can make it to Trenton, once they get there, the problem only gets worse because it's occupied by 1,500 Hessians. And the Hessians are German mercenaries hired by the British. They are basically the...
I thought they were Prussians. But yeah, Prussia, all that stuff. Basically Germanic in general. You know, just that area of Germany. Because at this point, Germany isn't a unified nation. It's Prussia, Austria, the Hessians, you know. It's not... Wait, this is still the time of the Holy Roman Empire. That won't fall until the Napoleonic Wars, which is a very unstable kind of sort of country, I guess. But yeah, so I assume the Hessians are from a part of the Holy Roman Empire. Russia, I don't even think exists yet, at least not as its own nation. Maybe as like a part of the empire. But or even Austria for that matter. But yeah, so yeah, they're basically German. Holy Roman Empire, basically German.
Blackwater of their day. They are the world's premier soldiers for hire. They are in every way professionals, and good ones at that. The Continental Army, on the other hand, is a bunch of average Joes that picked up muskets one day. They don't know how to march. They don't know how to fight that great, but they're willing to fight. It is quite literally pros versus Joes, and to make things worse, the Joes are freezing, starving, and low on supplies, and the Hessian pros are not. They are the exact opposite. This is borderline...
Which means if you can get those supplies, you can re-energize the men, depending on how many Hessians there are. Obviously, 10 Hessians versus like 2,500 Americans is a little different, because 10 men are going to need less supplies for, let's say, a month than 2,500, but still. Anyways,
impossible. If they're going to pull this off, they're going to need a Christmas miracle, which is exactly
right.
why we're going to attack on Christmas.
Beautiful. That's the thing. Like the North Koreans, North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War did the same thing. Like they had their own holy day or whatever, and they're like, you know what, we'll recognize our celebrations. Yeah, the Americans and South Vietnamese relaxed their capabilities over that period, and the North Vietnamese took advantage of that. And yeah, that's a strategy for you. Make yourself like make it look like you're not in a position to be attacked. The enemy will like kind of ease in anticipation for, or well, lack thereof, like anticipation for something like that. There's no anticipation, basically. And you take advantage of that lack in awareness. Okay.
Alright, so it's decided. We're attacking Trenton on Christmas, so we got to get a plan together. First things first, we got to be able to transport all the men and all the cannons across the river as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, we're going to need as many boats as possible. Luckily, the Delaware River is used for commerce, so there's these things called Durham boats that a lot of farmers and businesses...
I mean, in theory, you could also use it to kind of hide among the tradesmen
that operate on the river already own, and these boats are capable of carrying a huge quantity of weight because they're usually used for carrying like iron ore or crops. So when we get our hands on those, we'll be able to transport large quantities of men and cannons across the river as quickly as possible, and they're already along the river. So George Washington orders his guys to go out weeks in advance and track down all the farmers, all the businesses that own these Durham boats, and first, they need to ask if they can borrow them. If they're not going to let the Continental Army borrow them, they're going to ask them if they can buy them, and if they can't buy them, we're just going to steal that shit. We're going to strategically transfer that shit to our location. Okay?
Yeah. The government likes that idea today too, so not a new concept.
Not really that
or an old concept, antiquated, whatever.
great. It's not good for, you know, the whole hearts and minds, and we want everybody on our side to think we're the good guys thing, but our back is up against the wall. It has to be done. We need these
desperation.
Boats. We can't buy them, and we can't borrow them. We're going to fucking steal them. So the men go out, and they acquire the boats. Okay, now for the actual plan, how we're going to conduct this battle. We are going to go there. We are going to leave at night. We are going to cross the frozen Delaware River with giant chunks of ice floating down it in these Durham boats in the dark, and then we're going to
sounds dangerous.
9 miles to Trenton and hopefully get there.
Probably why it was done. Because it's like the most impractical thing, and the most impractical thing is the most unexpected thing, meaning it is the greatest thing to do because the enemy isn't expecting it. Therefore, when you do end up doing it, you catch them off guard and unprepared.
Before the sun is up, and we can still.
And when you're outnumbered, catching them off guard and unprepared is a great thing because numbers only work when both sides are of comparable, like, logistical strength. Like, you know, like a bunch of people with guns going at a bunch of people with, you know, bows and arrows or something like that. It doesn't matter how big the guys with the bows and arrows are, like how much of a force it is. They still got bows and arrows. Something infinitely inferior to gunpowder. Just guns. Fire from however far away. You'll hit. You'll cause more damage than an arrow could possibly ever do. So it's like, yeah, you could have 1,000-man army with guns versus a 10,000-man army with much older weaponry like bows, spears, whatever the case may be. And the guys with the guns will probably win because they have the technological advantage by a long shot. So, and this goes for catching them off guard. If you catch an army of equal technological advancement off guard, they can't ready that technology to be used, and therefore eliminating that technological aspect from their side altogether.
Attack him at night, and because it's Christmas, hopefully all the Hessians have been partying and drinking, and we can catch them when they're drunk, off guard, and just slaughter everybody. That's the plan.
Okay. Since there's an ad break, I'm gonna get some water and be right back. It's a little swig. Anyways, yeah, let's get back to the video.
It's not going to be
Another
conventional
pause it for
warfare.
that.
You're not going to march to Trenton, then form up in ranks on the outskirts of town in a field and wait for the Hessians to come out and form up their ranks and fight
Okay.
like they do, where we all just stand in the field and take shots at each other. No, we are going to rush into the town with our 6-foot-tall Kentucky rifles and start doing CQB guerrilla warfare tactics. That's the plan. I know what you're
Yep.
thinking. If we're just doing a bunch
That's the thing. Like, America did a lot of, like, okay, I'm not sure if it's the Continental Army necessarily, but militias and all that at least did a lot of guerrilla-esque warfare, or well, I guess it was more or less guerrilla warfare. And I'd say after the revolution, the U.S. fell back into the convention of just lining up soldiers to be, meat shields. Even today, you don't see anyone like. I don't feel like there's any like guerrilla operations operatives that are like, hey, we need to know how to take on guerrillas and to actually challenge them. Like, it's not like in Vietnam they had like anything to deal with the Viet Cong, where it's like, well, the Viet Cong are basically guerrilla patriots to the North Vietnamese. So what we're going to do is, study them and learn how to counter the Viet Cong effectively. Maybe even use our own guerrilla tactics. It's like, I wonder why you lost. And that's the thing. Rules of war obviously are humane and all that, but rules of engagement and war and all that, and military law or war law, whatever you want to call it, only works when both sides are mutually understanding it. Like, it's the same thing with like the Japanese. The Japanese shot at easy targets like, medics. So what did the medics do? They made themselves not look like medics. They grabbed proper guns, all that stuff, because they were in a situation where the conventions didn't follow. They couldn't follow traditional conventions because the enemy wasn't willing to. Now that was isolated. It's not like it was some calculated, like, okay, we're just going to ignore the conventions of war. But like, when you're put into a position like that, the leadership has to ignore the conventions of war in order to survive, much less win. Anyways,
combat inside of an urban environment, why are we bothering to bring a bunch of cannons with us? Surely cannons won't be good for CQB, right? Wrong, because we've got Henry Knox, like Fort Knox where they keep all the gold. Yeah, that guy. He's George Washington's chief of artillery, and he's...
I figured it was named after Henry Knox. Again, going back to oversimplified, he mentioned Henry Knox. He didn't mention Fort Knox at all, but I'm like, two and two together. Not a rocket scientist, kind of the conclusion.
But to revolutionize how cannons are used in combat. Henry Knox
is going
to write the playbook for CQB cannon.
This is going to be like, traditionally cannons weren't, or in artillery, I guess, from a modern perspective, wasn't used in urban environments, and now it's going to be used to bomb urban environments. That kind of like the feel.
Warfare, which shouldn't even be a thing.
They made a CQB AT4, which is pretty sweet.
Wait, hold on, time out. That's
because usually cannons are just, you put them up on the hill, they shoot
the
enemy from far away. That's how they're used. That's what artillery is at this point in time. Henry Knox, however, isn't going to have his one big artillery battery up on the hill. He's going to take his men that man the cannon, he's going to take them and the cannon, and he's going to attach them to different infantry units, and they are going to roll into town with the infantry, and every time they hit a major crossroads or a choke point, the cannon is going to set up there, and they're going to hold that.
So it's basically like an early version of a tank, because obviously, like, I mean, nowadays we have like actual like those artillery cannons or guns or whatever you want to call them, like that go on for like 20, 30, 40 feet, whatever, and can fire from 5 miles away, or like 50. So I assume he's basically, so obviously he's not doing that. He's going in with more like tank-esque. We're going to just roll it down the street and fire at anything that needs to be fired at.
crossroads and that choke point with the cannon, and they're going to be using canister shot, which is basically a burlap sack full of a bunch of tiny cannonballs, essentially turning it into a giant fucking shotgun, and we all know shotguns are the best for CQB.
Pistols put holes in people.
Shotguns are great for close quarters because shotguns aren't like regular bullets where it just shoots a single slug. It's like a bunch of BBs packed into a shell, you know, so you fire and all those BBs spread out and can hit multiple targets. So yeah, probably would prefer that.
Rifles put holes through people. Shotguns at the right range with the right load will physically remove a chunk of shit off your opponent and throw that shit on the floor.
So Henry
Also, depending on the spread, hit multiple people and do that to multiple people.
Knox and his artillery boys are going to be going in attached to the main assault element that is led by George Washington himself. There's also going to be two other elements of this attack. And the second element is absolutely critical for mission success because there's
Also, 50 BMG can do that. Like if you watch, because I've watched, you know, like ballistics testing, and it's crazy. Like a 50 BMG, these ballistic dummies like remove a lot. So I'm just going to say that much. But you know, they remove a lot and are very dangerous. Probably the most dangerous. Like then you get like a, what is it, 20, 22 caliber. Like dude, I don't even notice it actually hit the target that it was aimed for. There's like no like what's the word, wave of to show that it even entered, much less a visible entry wound.
the Delaware River going down, Trenton is right here, and then there's a little creek that peels off the Delaware River called the Assunpink Creek.
Okay.
Come again. And to answer your question, yes, it is taking an enormous amount of self-control not to make a joke about the name of this creek. Anyways, moving on. In order for this mission to succeed, we need to take control of this bridge immediately and cut it off, because if the Hessians are able to get all their men and get them across the bridge, they'll be able to form up, and then there's one giant choke point, and then it's just going to be a slugfest, and the Americans are probably not going to win because they're going to have to run across a bridge to get to the Hessians, or the Hessians are just going to retreat, go to the nearest town, and come back with a ton of reinforcements. And the problem George Washington faces with this is there's not a lot of people capable of leading this force that he also actually trusts, because the vast majority of high-ranking officers in the Continental Army at this point in time are politically hostile to George Washington, and they're running off to Congress trying to steal his job. Really, the only big names that are super loyal to George Washington himself are Henry Knox, who has to be with George Washington, and Nathaniel Greene, the fighting Quaker, aka his right-hand guy, and he also needs him with the main assault force. So he needs somebody that he can trust that's going to lead these men in combat. So he turns to John Sullivan. Now, John Sullivan and George Washington definitely have their differences. They don't necessarily like each other. They get on each other's nerves. But Sullivan isn't a politicking general. He's not going behind George Washington's back trying to steal his job. His and George Washington's disagreements fall over how to win the battle, not necessarily who should be leading. This guy is a straight up hardcore soldier that
so yeah, if it's simple disagreements like how to fight, you have more trust in the person than if they're just trying to politics you out of your job, you know? And this isn't even necessarily the revolution. This goes like even into like World War II or something like that, where like there's this political strife between generals trying to take each other's jobs, whereas like in the revolution you actually had a worry about like the revolution itself, people going for power. Now that we already have that established, by the time of world wars or something like that, you don't really have that side of the politics, you know, backstabbing, all that. It's more or less I think I'm better than you kind of thing, which since this is a simple petty I think I'm better than you thing, it's a lot easier to be like, follow my orders, do what I do, go fight, because they're not really concerned about them, you know, going for glory, or like he just wants to get the job done. He has a different perspective, but still just wanting to get the job done. So you're able to put a lot more trust into him doing it. because he's not going to backstab you in the end.
Just wants to go in there, get the job done as effectively as possible. Once John Sullivan has his orders, he is a guy that just goes out there and gets it done. He can improvise on the fly, and he is hyper aggressive. He believes that having an imperfect plan that is executed immediately and violently is better than a perfect plan that takes a little while to figure out. And that is why George Washington comes to him with this mission to take over the bridge over the Assunpink and is like, look, I don't care how you do it, just fucking get it done. Take this bridge.
Again, expediency is best because it means it gives the enemy less time to build forces, to react, to all that stuff. So yeah, you could go in with an imperfect plan as long as you get it done quickly and with as little enemy intelligence on you as possible, all that. You could probably win. Like I said, especially if they're caught off guard with little to no preparation. You know, no one's having guns in their hands, anything like that. They're eating around a campfire or something. You know, that would be the most optimal time to attack, because then they'd have to rush. They'd have to go around in their sleepwear, something like that. Not able to camouflage. I mean, this doesn't have camouflage, but for a modern perspective, not able to camouflage this easily. Much easier pickings, things like, you know, just things like that make it a lot easier to do. Like, there's plenty of medieval battles that one side won because the other side didn't have time to put on their armor. You know, it's not necessarily because they were outnumbered, but because they just couldn't put on their armor, and they couldn't grab their most effective weapons because it just was a get in, fight, you know, just try to repel them.
The third element of this attack wasn't going to be as vital. It was more or less going to be insurance. They were going to cross the Delaware River further south below the Assunpink River on the other side of the bridge from Sullivan. They were then going to occupy the road between Trenton and Bordentown, New Jersey, which was the nearest British outpost,
so yeah, hold off reinforcements.
All the reinforcements would be coming from, and if they ended up coming, their job was going to be to stop them, or if they couldn't stop them, at least harass and delay them and give Washington the time.
At least get them down to a reasonable amount. Like, at the very least, just start picking them off. Maybe they come down with 2,000, get them down to 1,000. That's much more manageable, you know, kind of thing.
Needed to take over Trenton. And because this was not as vital, he would end up giving this job to General Cadwalader, who, while he was loyal to Washington, he also didn't have a great reputation for operating well under pressure. He was too conservative. But he was really the only other loyal guy around that was a general, so Washington basically more or less had to give him the job. So
right. And again, this being not so crucial means that the conservatism is more acceptable. Basically, you know, if he ultimately loses, it's not as bad as if he was given the more crucial action.
The leadership that he needs to the best that he could do. Now he's got to improve morale. He's got to get all of his men's hearts into this fight, and he's just brutally honest.
Interesting how he can do that, knowing, because that's, like I said, the men don't need to be loyal to the revolution necessarily, unless Washington comes out and says the king's going to have your heads just as much as he's going to have mine. Despite the fact that you're just commoners who signed up because of me or whatever. Like, unless he said something along those lines, I wouldn't have the most faith in this motivational speech working.
With him. He straight up just comes out and tells him, look, this is going to be victory or death. We're going to fucking win or we're all going to die. Those are the only solutions. And that literally becomes the call phrase for the mission. Like, different units operating in the darkness, you hear somebody off in the distance, you yell out a code word and they respond back with the right code word. That way you know it's a friendly. The call sign that you yell out is victory, and the person responds with or death. And everybody men are actually fucking pumped, because
that's interesting.
First time in their entire military career that they are going out on the offensive. They get to be the aggressor. Everything up until this point has just been them hunkering down and waiting for the big, bad, invincible British military to come get them and kick their ass. And this would probably be exciting for a lot of like men who actually want to be soldiers, at least. Like, just get out, go on the offensive, be the hero, you know. I think, pretty antiquated belief of, you know, the glory of war.
kind of thing. And of course, this becomes a World War One topic of where's the glory in war. But back before World War One, this is like 100 something, like 150, less than 150 years, maybe like more like 125 years before World War One. So there's still this illusion of glory to be had in war, despite the fact that you're just another, meat shield for the higher ups.
This is the first time ever that they're going to roll up and they're going to do the ass kicking. So this is it. The game is set. It is victory or death. The American Revolution is going to get a win right here, right now, or it is going to die and we're going to stay British forever.
Okay. Merry Christmas.
Day, 6 p.m., 1776. All the head honchos are inside of a house. They're all looking at George Washington.
Yeah, great time to attack. Again, holiday. Everyone's probably like, everyone's celebrating Christmas. Keep in mind, they're all Christians. At the end of the day, it's not like they're going up against Muslims or something, which obviously Muslims don't celebrate Christmas. Jews don't, but they also have Hanukkah, which I'm not sure if Hanukkah aligns with Christmas exactly, but it's pretty close. I don't think, from my knowledge, Muslims I don't think have a holiday that lines up perfectly with Christmas, or at least close enough. So again, they're all Christians who celebrate Christmas on the same day. This is going to be a great time to launch an attack because they'd probably go on the assumption that our fellow Christians are going to celebrate the same holiday and take the day off.
Washington, Nathaniel Greene, Henry Knox, John Sullivan, General Cadwalader, all looking at him like, are we still going through with this crazy plan? Because not only is this plan crazy, there's now also a snowstorm outside. And George Washington issues the order. The weather doesn't matter. The clock is still ticking. We're going anyways. And you know what? Finding the silver lining, it probably adds to the element of surprise because now it's not just the Hessians thinking, surely the Americans wouldn't cross a frozen river on Christmas to kill us in our sleep. Now it's the Americans surely wouldn't cross a frozen river on Christmas in a snowstorm to kill us in our sleep, right? Wrong. No, that's
yeah. Like this goes back to again, everyone there is a Christian. They could take advantage of that. Surely a fellow Christian will not attack on the most holy day of our religion, kind of thing, which makes it the perfect time to attack. Like I said, the Vietnamese did this with their own holiday. The North Vietnamese, they basically said we're going to observe our holiday. They didn't. They took advantage of the fact that that holiday exists to begin with. And same thing here.
Exactly what we're doing. Board the fucking boats. 7 p.m. They start ferrying guys across the river, and the weather just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It's no longer just snow falling. It is sleet and freezing rain. Visibility is incredibly low, and it's getting darker and darker by the minute, and they've got nothing but lamps to light them up while they're crossing a frozen river, getting just pissed on by freezing rain. This slows down, and it takes hours longer than it was supposed to for Washington and Sullivan's men to get across the river, and they are now hours behind schedule. They don't get all their men across the river until 1 in the morning, and as soon as they get all their men across the river, they receive word that Cadwalader's men weren't able to cross at all. So now it's just the 2 of the 3 elements that they wanted. The men are
What? So Cadwalader, whatever, was my question was he was, it's possible he was being more conservative because he's the more conservative general here. So it's like he saw the bad weather, the same exact bad weather as Washington. Washington was like cross anyways. He's like, it's too bad. You know what? Never mind. But like I said, that ideally wouldn't matter because it's a less important thing. Washington was probably at least hoping he'd get across and be able to do something. But he probably wasn't expecting too great of an outcome on his end, just enough. So it probably isn't that big of a deal.
already freezing. They're going to have to walk 9 miles through this snowstorm to get to Trenton. They only have 2/3 of the men that they wanted, and 2 men fell off the boats and froze to death already, and the rest of the men are actively freezing to death. And George Washington considers turning back, but he realizes that under these conditions, it's probably going to take longer to ferry the men back across the river than it is just to march to Trenton. And at least if they're marching, they'll be able to stay warm instead of sitting here waiting for their turn to hop on a boat.
Exercise is a great way to stay warm. If you can stay warm, you can avoid, you know, all the issues with being cold.
So that's it. We've crossed the point of no return. No matter how bad it gets, we have to keep pushing forward. It is quite literally victory or death at this point. They start marching to Trenton. And this march takes way longer than it's supposed to. The men are still pumped spiritually, but physically they are still starving, freezing. It's a snowstorm. It's dark, and all they
not a great time to
leading the way.
be a soldier.
Sullivan's men split up because they're taking different routes to attack different spots on the town. Sullivan winds up sending a runner over to George Washington and is like, hey, our men are completely soaked with this freezing rain. All of our black powder's wet. We're not going to be able to shoot people when we get there. To which Washington replies, then use bayonets. John Sullivan just getting the job done.
Keep in mind, this is a time when bayonets are still very much relevant. Guns are incredibly inefficient to fire still. You know, takes forever to load. You only get one shot, and then you have to take forever to load again. So yeah, you basically get one shot. And if you're in close quarters, you need to rely on your bayonet, of course. If you're just marching in a line in like a traditional battle, at the time, you fire your volley, let the line behind you fire their volley while you reload, and then you march, and fire your volley while they reload, and so on and so forth. But yeah, if you're like hand-to-hand combat at this point, yeah, you gotta rely on your bayonet.
Anyways, is like, okay, Roger, take over the bridge with nothing but pointy sticks. You got it. They don't make it to Trenton until like 7:30 in the morning. The sun's already coming up. Everything is going wrong. They're missing one of their three elements. The black powder's wet. The sun is now up when they were supposed to attack at the dark. And the Hessians didn't go and get drunk the night before, and they're all just sleeping. The perfect plan that we had is...
I mean, they're all just sleeping, so as long as it can be as quiet as possible, you could still catch them off guard. And completely unprepared, especially if their guns are away from their sleeping quarters. So yeah.
It no longer exists. The only thing we have now is immediate and violent execution of whatever we've got.
Yeah, let's try some schoolyard bullshit.
So the Americans
attack at 8 I'm down for that.
There's very few guards out because again, it's the day after Christmas and a snowstorm just ended. Surely the Americans aren't on their way, right? Wrong. All the guards get
They've been on their way.
Henry Knox and his boys roll in there with cannons, set them up on the street. Everybody in town's been alerted from taking out the guards. Hessians start running out of the buildings in their pajamas with their guns, trying to figure out what's going on. They're getting lit up by canister shot from Henry Knox's artillery.
Like I said, catch them off guard like that. Not even prepared in the slightest to fight.
Chaos for the Hessians, and then the American infantry starts doing what the American infantry does, and they start deliberately targeting the officers so they can't give any of the men any orders. So it's just mass chaos.
Keep in mind, this is a point in time where you don't target officers, and the Americans are like, yeah, but we have a revolution to win. Let's not actually care about that too much. You know, like I said, especially when you're desperate for winning, you're the underdog, all that. Yeah, rules of engagement do not matter.
For the Hessians, absolutely everywhere. And then to make things even worse for the Hessians, some of the American civilians inside the town of Trenton start helping in the battle. One soldier had an account that he witnessed a woman from a second-story window shoot and kill a Hessian captain.
This is New England, I believe. I think it was New England that was more separatist. Because it's like a lot of people in the Americas, in the United States specifically, did not want separation. I think even a majority. And I think most of those people were Southerners. I think most people in the North were fine with it.
Which is just poetry, because American men don't engage in gentlemanly warfare, and American women definitely don't. Some of the Hessian troops wind up retreating across the bridge before Sullivan can take it, but ultimately he does wind up taking control of this bridge at about 8:30. So we are 30 minutes into this battle. America's already taken the bridge. They're kicking ass, and Colonel Rahl, the Hessian commander, is just now getting out of his quarters. They picked him up the second the attack started, but you know, he had to go and get his uniform on and get his powdered wig.
And to be a gentlemanly soldier, which Americans don't really care about being, so yeah, you're going to lose.
Got to go win in style. So he comes out and it's just complete chaos. Men are scattered everywhere. All of his officers are fucking dead. He hops on his horse and starts rallying his men to this apple orchard right outside.
Until he gets shot. Because again, it doesn't matter if you're a general. You are a military target.
Side of town. So Colonel rolls out there on horseback, yelling orders. He's getting all of his men to this apple orchard, gets most of them there, starts getting them formed up, and then some random American, some fucking farm kid with a Kentucky rifle notices, oh look, a guy on horseback with a bunch of fancy shit on his head, wig.
Like I said, dude, at this point, you're just making yourself a target. Like, at least the officers before that didn't take the time to get ready probably had better luck blending in with the enlisted men. Where, like, this general who took his time to stand out, not a good thing. Like, that's the thing. Like, in nature, animals that stand out are the first to die because they're the ones that attract the predators. This is basically the same logic.
Shoot that guy.
So now Colonel
Exactly.
wounded, basically orders his men to carry him back to his quarters and tells his officers, like, good luck, fucking figure it out. And by the time
What officers?
that unfolds, Sullivan already has cannons on the other side of the Assunpink River pointed at them on the apple orchard. Henry Knox has all the cannons moved around them on the other side, and it's just all the Hessians standing in the middle surrounded by cannons and Americans, and they're forced to surrender. When it was all said and done, 22 Hessians had been killed, 83 had been wounded, and they captured 900. The rest of them managed to escape across the bridge before
How many Americans? Let's hear the American stats.
Sullivan took it over. And the Americans, the untrained, undisciplined, inferior fighting force, managed to suffer, let me check my notes, fucking zero casualties.
Let's go!
Was the frozen Delaware River. It's the only thing that took out any Americans in this entire operation. And to most people, that's it. That's the story of the famous painting of Washington standing up on a boat crossing the frozen Delaware River on Christmas to kill his enemies. There's literally
so we're getting the you learned this in school, let me tell you more thing.
Entire like 90-minute movie about this entire battle. It's like my favorite Christmas movie ever. It's called The Crossing, and this is where they end the story. But in reality, this is where the story begins.
Okay.
So while most people in the story there, and they're like, oh, America had their first victory at Trenton. Hooray, the revolution is saved. No, that's not how reality works, okay? A bunch of Hessians escaped across the bridge, and they're going to go kill the British. And Cornwallis and General Howe aren't going to be able to go home and get laid. They're going to be super pissed off. They're going to come back with a...
Don't mess with a man and his sexual desires. That is how... Yeah, just don't do it. Just don't do it, man. Like, the fact that these British generals are now not going to be able to go home, see their women, and, you know, have very much consensual relations with those women, that is not going to go over well. They're now mad. Madder than they were before. Madder than the revolution itself.
Ton of men and crush George Washington. So while everybody else is celebrating because America just got their first victory, George Washington said, grab the supplies, pack your shit up. We're heading back across the Delaware right now. And that's exactly what happens. The men are dog-ass tired. They've been up all night. They just want a battle. But
yeah, they got to meet the British at the other side again. I'd probably have some contingency in the city itself, possibly. Again, the conservative general that stayed behind is already back on the other side of the Delaware, I imagine. So you got that going for you, possibly.
Hey, George Washington says so. That's what we're going to do. They get all the supplies.
Or at least you could cross the bridge again, depending on how close you are to it.
That they just captured. They pack all their shit up. They head back across the Delaware. At least there's not a snowstorm going on. So they get back. Now Washington has to handle the fact that the clock is...
the thing is, you can't take advantage of that snowstorm for cover or anything. So it's kind of a double-edged thing. That's the thing. Like, those complicated environmental, like, things, it's a double-edged thing. Because snowstorm, not good. But for defense, it's pretty... It's better. It's better for defense because it could kind of blend in with the snow.
Still ticking, like the enlistments still expire on December 31st at midnight, and now it's December 27th. And now Cornwallis, who's pissed off that he didn't get to go home for Britain for the winter and bang his wife, is marching towards them with 8,000 redcoats.
Again, never messes with a man and his desire to be with his love. Let's just leave it at that. Let's just leave it at that.
And he's got like approximately approximately 2,000-ish guys, and they all get to go home in 3 days. So if Cornwallis shows up and his army just dissolves overnight, he's not going to stand there with 8,000 guys and be like, oh, I guess we can all go home now. No, he's going to continue marching down to Philadelphia and squash the entire rebellion. If Washington can't figure out how to put up a defense right here, right now, it's still game over. So Washington forms up his men and delivers a speech, and he basically lays it out how it is. He's like, look, you guys can go home if you want. I can't stop you, but if you guys stay, give me one more month. I will get all of you a $10 bonus from Continental Congress. I will get you paid, and if you give me one more month, we can fight and keep this rebellion alive. Otherwise, we're never going to have another shot.
Again, you're relying on the undying loyalty of men who are part of a brand new nation who do not have that ingrained patriotism into them, you know? It's a hard sell. Depending on I imagine all men there are separatists, so they're probably more willing to stay with Washington than someone who's just there for the fun of it or something, but still.
Like this, they're gonna absolutely crush us if you guys quit right now. So they stay. They're freezing, they're starving, they're beat up, they're exhausted, but they stay. And as news spreads that America just actually beat the invincible British military at Trenton, he starts getting some more reinforcements, some more militias join under Washington. He gets some new recruits, and his troops go from 2,000 to approximately 4,000 men. It is now 4,000 untrained American colonials versus 8,000 redcoats under Cornwallis.
Not great, but better. And again, if they could take advantage of some, unconventional tactics, even better.
The odds are getting better, but they're not looking that great.
Right.
This is looking like America's going to get its ass kicked again. This is quite literally, yet again, victory or death. They got to figure out how to stop Cornwallis. And yet again, George Washington's back is up against the wall. He cannot decide whether or not he wants to take this fight. He has to take this fight. The only thing he can decide is where and how. So he decides to go back to Trenton, and they're going to set up all their defenses on the bridge and force the British army to cross that narrow choke point while the American army is firing at them. Okay, strategically, this is brilliant. Funnel your enemies into a narrow choke point, light them up with cannon fire. Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Metaphorically, also brilliant, because if you're going to make your last stand, fight and die, there's no better place to do it than the ass in pink. Am I right? I tried so hard not to make that joke. I'm sorry. So that's it. That's the plan. Washington and his men recross the Delaware for a third time. They start digging trenches. They're getting the...
I mean, it would be great if he could think of that when they were already in the city and, had the city properly. But hey, maybe they could make advantage of some of the supplies and, eat for a minute while the British are still on their way.
Set up. They are getting ready to make their last stand, and George Washington goes over to John Sullivan and is like, John, I need you to take your best guys. I need you to go up the road where Cornwallis is coming from, and I need you to just harass the shit out of him and slow him down as long as possible. Okay, on one hand, like, why does that matter? Why are we trying to slow him down? We're making our last stand. Like, we might as well do it during the daylight. I don't want to fight at night, but also this is
again, element of surprise, make the enemy fight on your terms. Night obviously isn't particular, but if you're expecting it and they're not, you can prepare for it. I think even today, night isn't exactly preferred, even with night vision goggles and all that. But again, fighting at night and you're the determiner of it gives you an advantage already.
John Sullivan, the guy that just takes orders and accomplishes a fucking mission. So he takes his men and he goes and he does just that. So Cornwallis is trying to march 8,000 redcoats down the road, and John Sullivan and his guys are just in the tree line taking pop shots at him the entire time. They launch an ambush. They dip. The British have to turn, file ranks, go out into the field.
Right.
They fire back into the trees. Turns into a whole 45-minute thing every time. And by the time they return fire, John Sullivan and his guys are already gone.
They just, they just harass them. Do a quick volley fire, bounce, wait for them to fire at basically nothing, get back in a single file, orderly, whatever, march some more, same thing, fire, turn around, get ready to fire at basically what's, at this point, nothing again, and so on and so forth.
Harass and delay them forever. Nobody really knows why we're trying to delay them, but, fuck it, George Washington said so, and he probably has a plan, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So Cornwallis and...
Yeah, like I said, night is not a particular a particularly good time to fight, but if you're the one coming up with the plan to fight at that time, you're the one with the advantage because you can kind of coordinate. Okay, you know the disadvantages. You probably have an understanding of the land, the lay of the land, and you can probably take advantage of that, even with inferior numbers and even to some degree inferior technology.
His men make it to the Assunpink Bridge late afternoon on January 2nd. The Americans are there. They're ready. Cornwallis just launches full-on frontal attack against the bridge, and America mows them down. They retreat. He launches another full frontal attack. American cannon fire and musket fire mows them down again. They retreat. Cornwallis does a third attack. They get mowed down again. He lost somewhere between 150 and 365 men. Accounts from that day said the bridge looked like it was painted red with British blood. At this point, it's getting dark. The battle for the day is over. Both sides start getting their camp ready. They're going to camp down for the night, get ready. They're going to duke this out in the morning. That's what they're thinking. George Washington, on the other hand, has other plans in mind. And this is why he sent John Sullivan out to delay Cornwallis, because he wanted this battle to get broken up by nightfall so that he could pull off a pro-gamer move. Washington takes a couple of hundred guys and orders them to just spend the entire night building bonfires and making as much noise as humanly possible. Be loud, have conversations, yell, build a bunch of fires, make it
What's the plan here? Is this like a distraction?
Seem like there's 4,000 motherfuckers on this side of the bridge, and the rest of us are...
Oh, what he's doing is having, like, let's say a contingency of 500 men of the 4,000. It's like having 500 men make it look like 4,000 men on that side of the bridge alone. So probably make it look like there's a lot more men than there actually are. And again, great strategy, because if you can actually trick the opposing force into believing there's a lot more men, you can then start diminishing their confidence and break ranks on the enemy side. You know, like, just completely wreck them.
All gonna take these tiny
psychologically at that.
Trails. We're gonna go around Cornwallis to the town of Princeton, where he just came from. We're gonna fuck up all his reinforcements and steal their supplies.
Okay. Let's go again.
Okay, that's the American plan. Cut back over to the other side of the bridge. Cornwallis is having a meeting with all of his officers, and they're trying to figure out what to do, because they still might want to attack at night. And Cornwallis and pretty much all the other officers are on the same page of like, no, we're gonna attack in the morning. He's not gonna go nowhere. He's trapped. He can't go anywhere. We'll attack him.
That's what you think.
In that meeting, Sir Erskine, he's an officer, and he's like, no, we need to attack Washington right now. Have you guys not been paying attention? This is Washington's entire MO. He's done this like 15 fucking times. Okay, we had him.
Yeah, Washington's used, like, before this, Washington's used things like the cover of night or fog or something to sneak by.
Cornered at Rhode Island, and we're like, we're gonna crush him in
Long Island.
And then somehow he evacuated 9,000 men overnight and disappeared like a fart in the wind. Okay, then he
exactly.
Fort Lee, and then he attacked Trenton.
Because that's the thing. At this time, at least, you know, bunked up for the night. Battles were fought in the day. You bunked up for the night. You didn't do anything in the night. And Washington's like, yeah, but I'm going to do something in the night.
Out of nowhere. He's a slippery motherfucker. We need to go get him right
now.
I have a gun in my room. You give me 5 seconds, I'll get it. Boom! I'll blow their brains out.
Okay.
Just don't get it, do you?
But then Sir Erskine kind of looks like
you gotta follow the rules.
like an asshole, because when they look across the river, there's just more and more fireplaces popping up all over the place, and that's when Cornwallis says, we'll go over and bag him in the morning. Washington and his are pushing 12 miles around them to head up to Princeton. Yes, like the college. This is where the college is. They're going to attack Princeton University. They march all night long. When the sun's coming up, they're approaching Princeton. Cut back over to the British. Cornwallis and his boys wake up. They go over there, and it's just a bunch of dead fire pits everywhere. There's not an American.
Wait, what?
They go over there.
Hold on.
They're approaching Princeton. Cut back over to the British. Cornwallis and his boys wake up. They go over there, and it's just a bunch of dead fire pits everywhere.
Of course.
American insight.
I fucking knew it.
He must feel vindicated.
Oh!
Cutting back over to the Americans as they're approaching Princeton. There's
This is also another problem with British military, is like, in the British military, officers are basically the elite, you know, like, that's the most expedient way to become an officer, is be aristocracy. So you have these, you know, Nepo baby, you know, my dad's a duke, so I'm a, you know, major general. And there's no guys there with actually good general leadership competence. You know, in America, it's like there is no aristocracy. You have to work years in, years out to like actually become a fully enlisted or fully commissioned officer plus college. At least to my understanding, I've never been in the military, don't know a military person. But from what I can gather, that's how it works, which obviously means that America, it's a lot easier to get a competent officer because he was most likely an enlisted man at some point. You know, if he didn't enter the military with officer credentials, he was an enlisted man. He was a grunt going out shooting at people and kind of thinking on his own 2 feet not to get killed. And you don't really have that with, you know, the British aristocrat, you know, officer class.
Roads going in and out, right? And the Americans are on one road, and there's 1,200 British reinforcements on the other road, and they're literally passing each other as America's entering Princeton, and they just kind of turn and look, and the fight breaks out right there.
Okay.
This turns into a giant shit show, right? They were marching on a road. They're not in battle formations. You've got John Sullivan and his men, and then Cadwallader and his men leading the way up front, and then George Washington's behind them. So John Sullivan and Cadwallader's men are the ones that engage first, and after a little while, the British start getting the better of Cadwallader's men, and they're breaking apart the 2 formations that John Sullivan and Cadwallader had set up, and they're about to split them in 2, break the line, and crush the American forces. At this point, George Washington, leading from the front, rides in on his horse into the break in the American line and starts waving his men into battle to charge and run in the open, and everybody sees, holy shit, that's George Washington. The British open up with a volley and just cover the entire battle in smoke, and George Washington disappears from eye view, and everybody just has the sinking in their stomach feeling of like, fuck, George Washington just died. That's it. But
that would be a critical hit to American morale. Like, they're still they still have morale because of George Washington. So yeah.
George Washington comes back into eye view, still on his horse.
Didn't even get his horse.
And they follow and proceed to crush the British line.
Great movie.
With the British line fractured, some of the redcoats turn, take off towards
favorite part of that movie.
Can reconvene with Cornwallis, and the rest of them are forced to retreat into Princeton University and take up occupation inside of some of the school buildings, and they barricade themselves inside. So the Americans roll in the cannons and just start lighting up Princeton University. Eventually, the British are forced to wave the white flag out of these school building windows, and they are forced to surrender. And from here, George Washington has yet another decision to make, because he knows that he is now in between Cornwallis and the redcoats and their supply depot in New Brunswick, which is the biggest supply depot for the British Empire in this entire area.
Very, very important supply depot to take then.
Brunswick and takes out that supply depot, it would be humongous. But also, that's exactly what Cornwallis is anticipating, and Cornwallis is for sure beelining it there as fast as he can, because he does not want to lose this supply depot. Instead, Washington decides it's finally time to take up winter quarters, and he's going to be a dick about it the entire time.
Okay.
He marches his men further into New Jersey, into a place called Morristown up in the hills, which is heavily populated by people supporting the Patriot cause. It's also up in the hills. There's high ground all over.
That's good, because the civilian populace will be fine with you there. They probably will be more likely to even join, or at least do some fighting outside of military and militia operations, giving you the advantage.
For the place, there's very few roads to get in and out. It is extremely easy for him to defend, and the British aren't going to be able to reach him there without taking a humongous amount of losses. More importantly, it's centralized in relation to all the other British outposts, so he has this impenetrable home base that's centralized. So from here, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, he just sends out raiding parties on all the British outposts and is relentlessly harassing them until they finally say, fuck this, and the British pull out of New Jersey altogether for the winter. When this news spread, thousands of
Let's go.
young men went and enlisted in the Continental Army. They got a ton of support from civilians. They got more food, more supplies, more everything. The entire
Exactly what they needed. Like, I mean, it probably would have been more or less fine anyways, but they desperately needed all that supplies. So the fact that they were able to get it as expediently as they did is good.
Revolution was a dying fire down to its last little red ember, and in its last moments, George Washington walked up with a fucking gallon of gasoline and poured it on top and turned it into a massive bonfire. The Battle of Trenton, Assunpink Creek, and Princeton all happened in the span of 10 days, and in that 10 days, George Washington proved to the entire world that the British military was not only not invincible, but that they could be beat. It is probably the only reason that you're not drinking tea from a kettle right now, and it is probably the most important 10 days in American history. So yeah, that is
possibly
the real story of the famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware on Christmas. He didn't just cross it once, he crossed it 3 times. He handed out 3 separate ass whoopings, saved the American Revolution, and changed the world forever. And that is why he is the father of the United States of America. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch, maybe order some
gonna have a
that's available at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
I'm gonna have a little end section.
And you guys thought Die Hard was a good Christmas story.
It is. Like, dude, my favorite Christmas movie. Anyways, that's probably it. Yeah, I was like, dude, I was like looking at this, like, thinking, oh yeah, it probably won't be much more than an hour, if at all. But I was able to get an extra, I was able to actually chunk out a lot of time from that reaction. I was kind of worried because I'm like, will I have much to say? But nah. But yeah, I think I might do more things like this, probably some more reaction challenges, like try not to laugh or something like that. So yeah, I think I was like, dude, honestly, we probably won't make it past like an hour or so. So I may throw in some gaming. I don't think I'll be doing this or doing that. Monday, Tuesday, something like that next week. Give me 1 second. But yeah, Monday, Wednesday, something like that. Probably will be another little wait a second here. Will probably be another reaction-esque thing, you know, like, because like I said, I want to do some more just chatting related stuff. But yeah, so if you're interested in seeing more of that, tomorrow probably back to gaming. But if you're interested in seeing more of reaction-esque things, you know, go check out all my links, follow me, know when I'm live. I got probably the easiest way to, I should probably start actually planning schedules, but know when I'm live is also Twitter. So yeah, make sure to go check out everything. I'm not sure if I'm going to start doing reaction content, uploading that to my main channel. I do have two unlinked YouTube channels actually. Probably put a little tab below in the about area, but for the things I just don't have room to link properly. But yeah, go check out everything else. And I don't know what channel I'm going to upload this on, but yeah, go check out everything else. I'm probably going to do more things similar to this, but yeah, I obviously want to ban gaming, so planning on doing more of that tomorrow. And till next time, goodbye.